New data from overseas shows imports into the U.S. are down since the tariff war started, while exports to other countries are quickly climbing.
This means major powers such as China and India are finding other markets for their products. Madeline Rivera has more from Washington.
In the opening months of 2025, bold promises echoed from Washington about a self-reliant America, free from the grip of foreign supply. That vision has already collided with reality. A sweeping executive order has rolled back tariffs on key imports like nickel, graphite and pharmaceuticals, signaling that US industry cannot yet carry the full load on its own. For car makers, this move could mean the difference between collapse and survival. Which industries gain the most, and how might this shift ripple through prices and global trade? Let's break it all down. In early 2025, the administration that once declared America would stand tall without foreign supply has shifted its course. A sweeping executive order has slashed duties on dozens of essential imports, reversing the hardline stance that defined the past year. More than 45 categories of goods have been carved out, ranging from nickel and gold to pharmaceutical compounds, specialized magnets, and even industrial LEDs vital for clean energy. The White House now admits that domestic industry cannot yet shoulder the full weight of modern demand. But the exemptions are not open invitations. They are bargaining chips, extended only to partners willing to strike reciprocal deals. For automakers whose supply chains depend on these exact resources, survival depends on where their governments stand in this trade shuffle. The policy reversal lays bare the tension between political slogans and industrial realities, raising deeper questions about how reliant America has become on the rest of the world. The roots of this shift lie in an undeniable fact. The country consumes far more raw material than it can produce. Minerals, metals, and compounds form the backbone of nearly every modern industry, and the gap between demand and domestic supply has only widened. The auto sector reveals this dependency most clearly. Electric vehicles, hailed as the future of transportation, require massive volumes of materials like graphite and nickel. Yet America produced none of the 52,000 tons of natural graphite it consumed in 2024. Every ounce came from abroad, with China controlling over 90% of global processing capacity. Even when the raw graphite originates outside China, it often passes through Chinese plants before reaching American manufacturers. Nickel follows a similar path. A single Michigan mine contributes modestly, while recycling offers some relief, but the overwhelming bulk comes from allies like Canada and Australia, with most processing handled offshore. The same story plays out across aluminum, gold, and other metals. US refineries and mines fall short, leaving imports from Brazil, Jamaica, and other suppliers to fill the gap. For car makers, these shortages translate into unstable costs and constant uncertainty. Policy changes may tweak the numbers, but reliance on imports remains the industry's soft spot, and no tariffs can cover it up. That vulnerability is most visible in the auto industry, which has been battered harder than any other sector by shifting tariffs. Vehicles rely on thousands of parts, many of which cross borders multiple times before a finished model reaches a showroom. Every new levy compounds the cost. This year alone, auto tariffs climbed to 25%, while steel and aluminum duties surged to 50%. Analysts project that these increases will add an estimated $108 billion in expenses for US automakers in 2025. Translated to the consumer level, that is about $5,000 tacked onto every American-made car and over $8,500 on imported models. Those are crushing figures for a business already balancing on slim margins. To shield buyers, many car makers have eaten the losses themselves, adjusting trims, scaling back profits, and hiding fees in contracts rather than passing the full spike directly to consumers. But that strategy cannot last forever. Luxury models and electric vehicles, both heavily dependent on foreign components, will be the first to show steeper prices. Executives remain split on how much relief exemptions will bring, with some seeing a temporary lifeline and others warning that unpredictable swings in policy are more damaging than the tariffs themselves. The immediate squeeze on automakers reveals how quickly national trade decisions ripple down to global companies, raising the question of who gains and who loses in the scramble for exemptions. That answer depends heavily on which partners Washington chooses to reward. The new executive order makes clear that tariff breaks will flow only to nations willing to offer something in return. This approach has ignited a race among governments eager to protect their industries from exclusion. The European Union and Japan were quick to strike deals, cutting auto tariffs to around 15%. South Korea soon followed, pledging new investments in the US in exchange for lighter duties. India, once penalized with a 50% rate over ties to Russian oil, is now pushing for reductions that could bring its tariff burden down to the 10 to 15% range. Taiwan, facing a 20% duty, has also reported progress. These negotiations create a patchwork of advantages that can dramatically reshape the competitive field. Automakers whose home governments secure favorable terms gain a critical edge, while those left outside face steep penalties. The uneven playing field complicates long-term strategy, since car production requires years of planning. With tariffs shifting unpredictably, companies are forced to gamble on uncertain futures. Global trade in the auto sector becomes less a matter of efficiency and more a high-stakes game of diplomatic alignment. For consumers, these maneuverings are far from abstract. Every policy adjustment eventually lands in higher sticker prices, fewer options on the lot, or longer wait times for deliveries. Tariffs on metals and parts feed directly into the cost of new vehicles, and while manufacturers have absorbed much of the shock so far, pressure is mounting. Interest rates are already making financing more expensive, and when rising tariffs pile onto the equation, many models risk slipping beyond the reach of average buyers. Automakers are scrambling for workarounds. Some are expanding plants on US soil. Others are experimenting with recycling strategies to reduce reliance on imports, and many are seeking alternative suppliers to diversify sourcing. But these solutions require years to take shape. A supply chain built over decades cannot be rebuilt overnight. In the meantime, consumers may find that the badge on the hood carries new political meaning. A German sedan, a Japanese hybrid, or an American truck that relies on foreign parts may each reflect very different tariff outcomes, making the final price as much a product of trade negotiations as of engineering or design. To complicate matters further, new investigations under Section 232 are underway, targeting goods from polysilicon to wind turbines. This means the cloud of uncertainty hanging over the auto sector is likely to grow heavier in the months ahead. The tariff reversal is not a reset button that wipes away the turbulence of the past year. Instead, it reframes the debate around an uncomfortable reality. American manufacturing depends on a steady flow of imported resources. Exemptions may offer temporary breathing room, but until domestic refining and production scale up meaningfully, the foundation remains fragile. Showrooms will divide along supply chain lines. Vehicles linked to privileged partners will stabilize, while those tied to penalized sources will face higher volatility. For consumers, three factors will define the road forward: where critical parts are sourced, which trade deals are locked in, and how fast domestic infrastructure can grow to close the gap. If those factors align, prices may cool and availability could improve. If they do not, the industry will see trims disappear, waiting lists return, and creeping costs push more buyers away. The brands that manage to balance engineering strength with negotiating skill will emerge strongest in this new landscape. What happens next is the real question. Do these tariff shifts buy automakers the time they need, or are they only delaying the inevitable? Will buyers be willing to shoulder higher prices, or could demand falter as the economy cools? And as Washington redraws the rules, will global partners stay aligned, or are trade wars about to shift into another gear? Now let's shift our focus to Russia, a country where for more than 2 decades Vladimir Putin cultivated an image of strength and permanence, presenting Russia as a fortress immune to outside weakness. Oligarchs displayed their wealth on the global stage, while oil and gas revenue poured billions into state coffers. That projection of power instilled pride at home and caution abroad. But the image was always fragile, and today the cracks are widening into something impossible to disguise. Beneath the slogans and propaganda, Russia faces an economic unraveling that can no longer be hidden. Across the country, everyday life carries the weight of decline. Shelves in stores grow thinner, prices climb with every week, and the ruble loses value with each passing month. Families ration food, stretch meagre wages, and quietly endure shortages that echo through both cities and small towns. Jobs vanish, paychecks shrink in worth, and the promise of stability that once held society together drifts further away. At the same time, billions of rubles are drained into the war effort, leaving ordinary citizens with little more than silence in the public sphere and muted discontent behind closed doors. The toll is not only financial, the human cost is devastating. The war consumes Russia's youth, pulling countless men from villages and cities into the battlefield. Millions of others have fled abroad to avoid conscription or escape a suffocating economy. The result is a nation losing people as quickly as it loses cash. Government forecasts themselves admit that by 2030, nearly 11 million workers will be absent from the labour force. Factories already struggle to keep lines running, and in many sectors the shortages are severe. Attempts to fill the gaps with migrant labour have provided only a fraction of what is needed, leaving industries paralysed. In this vacuum, Putin continues to cling to energy exports, once the foundation of his power. For decades, oil and gas made Russia wealthy and granted leverage over foreign capitals. Today, that lifeline falters. Refineries fall under drone attacks, knocking out over 13% of capacity and cutting deeply into output. Reserves are dwindling while international buyers steadily reduce dependence on Russian fuel. The very identity of Russia as an energy superpower is slipping, and with it, the ability of the Kremlin to command attention on the world stage. The heaviest blow, however, does not come only from sanctions or declining oil sales. It comes from the quiet retreat of the partner that once promised unwavering support. For years, China appeared to be the economic shield against Western pressure, a market and financial lifeline that would prevent collapse. But now that partnership is weakening. Chinese banks, wary of punishment from the West, are cutting ties. Transactions that once flowed easily are now frozen. Deals fall apart midstream, and Russian companies suddenly find themselves locked out of financial networks they relied on. Even regional banks in China are pulling back. A stunning reversal from earlier promises of limitless cooperation. What remains of that relationship is cobbled together through complicated and inefficient workarounds. Split transfers, obscure intermediaries, and covert payments keep some trade alive, but at far higher cost and risk. For Moscow, the change is humiliating. A partnership once promoted as unbreakable has been reduced to backdoor arrangements and fragile side channels. The damage is far more than an inconvenience. It cuts into the heart of an economy already struggling to breathe. Inside the Kremlin, the numbers no longer add up. Defense spending surges without restraint, draining resources at a pace the state cannot replace. Oil and gas revenues shrink as sanctions bite and buyers demand steep discounts. Currency reserves vanish quickly, leaving gaping holes in the budget. Every ruble diverted to missiles or tanks means less for hospitals, schools, or roads. Meanwhile, interest rates remain painfully high, strangling business activity and consumer spending alike. Companies hesitate to invest, households tighten their budgets, and the forecasts all point to deeper contraction. Economists describe Russia's situation as a narrowing corridor, where each choice produces more damage. Raise taxes and businesses collapse, print more currency and inflation runs wild. Cut spending and society feels the weight of neglect. As Chinese financial institutions continue their retreat, that corridor grows narrower, leaving the Kremlin trapped with fewer and fewer options. So, how long can the Kremlin keep hiding these cracks before the whole system gives way? Is this gamble headed for victory, or will it collapse under the weight of bankruptcy and betrayal? Share your take in the comments below. We'd like to hear your perspective. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. You can also explore any of the videos on screen right now for more powerful insights into the stories that matter.